How's it going, everybody? Today we're gonna be checking out a video from liberal Hivemind. Now, I've never actually seen this channel before, but they are fairly large, and this is a video called Tom Homan has hit his breaking point. And I'm gonna be honest, after I watched the very first couple seconds of this video, I basically knew that this was 100% what I wanted to cover as an edited video today.
Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hivemind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. And of course, here's your meme of the day, brought to you by Fivemind.com. I've never seen such a weak, fragile ideology.
So, real quick, I just want to analyze this for a minute. Ignore the bad cropping because of how my frame is set up, but Democrats keep telling us illegals weren't getting SNAP benefits and even called us liars for bringing it up. Now they're suing us for taking the SNAP they didn't get away from them. So, last I checked, most of the complaints about SNAP benefits were about American citizens who got SNAP benefits being upset that they were not getting their SNAP benefits. This feels like a meme that literally only works in a world where you are not using your brain cells to try to process anything whatsoever. But with that said, that should give you an idea of what we're in for in today's video, so let's roll that intro.
Everything is based on a false premise or a lie. And now, once again, we have another lie being fully and utterly exposed after Joe Biden's failed Kabul, Afghanistan withdrawal. After that absolute disaster in 2021, the Democrat Party and the entire Democrat media apparatus, they told us straight to our face, don't you worry, we are carefully vetting everyone. And if you suggest that just because they're Afghans, there might be a terror problem or they might be terrorists, well then you're a racist. A bigot. Even though these people were coming in fully unvetted, let's be totally honest, from a terror hotspot on the globe. No, you were a racist if you freaking questioned it.
You've been talking about this issue of the special immigrant visas for years, and you and I have been talking about it on this show for months. There are a number of other voices in the Republican Party that are already, whether on television or on tweets or whatever, starting to demonize Afghan immigrants, starting to talk about this is Biden's plan to put more Muslims in the country, starting to insinuate that these are bad people, they're terrorists, et cetera, really rank bigotry.
But now, of course, we know that was a lie. It's been confirmed with the document drop, that they actually had no idea who was even on the frickin' planes. These people were not vetted, and I think most accurately, they could not be properly vetted. How do you properly vet tens of thousands of people from a failed third world state? Well, the simple answer is you cannot. They didn't. And now the Trump administration once again is coming in to fix the mess that Democrats created.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on in there, and we're gonna have to piece it together bit by bit to kind of get an idea of what's going on. So I'm noticing a handful of fallacies together. One is that the left and the Democrats are the same thing. They're not. There are plenty of people who are further left of the Democratic Party that literally consider the Democratic Party to be the centrist party of America, with the conservatives being the more right-wing party, and they're not being a true left in the United States. This is also backed up by the fact that the Democratic Party tends to favor capital more often than not, and the further left you get, the more anti-capitalist you get. So that's the first thing that I needed to get out of the way, the idea that the left and the Democrats are the same thing. Secondly, if you actually listened to the left during the time where Biden was withdrawing our troops from Afghanistan, you could find tons of influencers on the left who were criticizing Biden specifically for the way he pulled our troops out of Afghanistan and how that would potentially destabilize the country or the region. And this isn't a point that I would be making in the first place if it weren't for the fact that this was a channel called Liberal Hivemind that ostensibly wants to sell you on the idea that everybody left of the Republican Party is all part of the same cabal of infrastructure and monolithic thought. If we look at the actual numbers involved there, it looks like the majority of the United States was in favor of Biden pulling our troops out of Afghanistan, but only 26% of them had a favorable view on how he went ahead with that. Now, unless you want to run with the narrative that only 26% of the country is technically left of the Republican Party, then your narrative kind of falls apart here. The left isn't a a monolith, and the Democrats and the left are not necessarily the same people. And even at the time, the left broadly was criticizing the way that this was handled. Even within the numbers of people who leaned Democrat, only 43% of them were saying that he did an excellent job. So I guess if your narrative relies on the idea that the Democrats were all gung-ho for this and how it was executed at the time, and now they aren't, or now the narrative is falling apart, then your narrative is actually the one that's falling apart, because yours is the one that's based off of either false premises or a lie. So it's really weird to hear that kind of projection coming from a channel that apparently doesn't want to be doing that kind of projection or wants to criticize that kind of projection from the other side. And now for your next claim about bringing in tons of people who were terrorists from Afghanistan. So we brought in approximately 180,000 Afghans to the United States after the withdrawal in 2021. Of that number, if you actually look at the 29-page report on the audit from the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the handling of the Afghan evacuees, only 55 evacuees were shown to have any links to any terror cells. But note that that's 55 people who were on the watch list. If you read further, of those 55 individuals, 46 were removed from the watch list for a variety of reasons, like the FBI determining that they were no longer considered a threat to the United States. So this is one of those situations where if you say the phrase, "we brought in terrorists from Afghanistan," it's a true phrase. But when you look at the numbers, we brought in 180,000 Afghan refugees, and of those 180,000, only 55 were found to have links to terror cells, and of those 55, only 46 ended up leaving that actual speculation, that watch list, all of that, leaving us with a grand total of 9 people linked to terror cells in 180,000. Moreover, the problem gets compounded further when we start looking at what terrorism is in the first place. So any unlawful use of violence or intimidation against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. I'm going to be providing a link to a Cambridge article that actually goes into the problem with the word terrorism in the United States. Basically, it gets down to the idea that using terrorism as a one-size-fits-all for so many different types of threats to national security creates a huge issue. The fact that terrorism is so broadly defined that simply intimidating someone to try to get their political views to change can be considered a form of terrorism means that this word, despite being the word that we are so concerned about since 2021, technically the word we were concerned about since the Bush administration, really doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. So of the 9 people out of 180,000 that came through, the best word we would use to describe them is one that is so loose that actual colleges are debating whether the word even applies to most people that it's being thrown at. For somebody that goes on and on about narratives falling apart once you scrutinize them, this narrative seems to have fallen apart from every single angle the minute I scrutinized it and did even a modicum of research.
And of course, this is now the worst thing to ever happen. It's a constitutional crisis. It's fascist, it's racist, it's this, that, and the other. But of course it isn't. No, it's common sense. And we are done cowering in front of these leftoids. We don't care about your labels anymore. Racist, misogynist, fascist, this, that, and the other. No, your lies have been exposed. And this administration is going to do the right thing whether you like it or not.
All right, once again, let's break things down one by one. If out of 180,000 people, only 9 were actually threats to the United States security, any type of broad sweeping generalizations towards them would fall into a category of why. If we're looking at the category of why you would do a broad sweeping generalization about a bunch of people for a set of factors that only a handful of them possess, then you are arguing that those people have inherent attributes to themselves, which are inherent to them or the region or whatever. And I have news for you. We have a word to describe that. generally it's racist. I mean, realistically, it's bigotry, it's intolerance, it's all kinds of things, but we have words for that. Like, you can be upset that leftists use those words somewhat accurately sometimes, somewhat inaccurately sometimes, but at the end of the day, we're describing a set of behaviors that you're exhibiting. To his point, though, the right is no longer afraid, quote, quote, or, too terribly worried about these labels being attributed to them, and I feel like maybe that says a little bit more about them than anyone else. After all, does a person who's truly a racist care about being called a racist if they are the ones who currently have power? As for fascist, I feel like that word does get overused a little bit, but it's not without its uses and it's not without its accuracies. After all, of the 14 points of fascism, we have an administration that does engage in the culture of tradition, does do everything in their power to reject modernism, does argue that action for action's sake is a good thing. President Trump himself has gone on record saying that disagreement can be seen as a form of treason with him. The administration does instill a fear of difference. They do appeal to social frustrations in the general populace. And your video showcases an obsession with a plot, an obsession with trying to bring terrorists into the United States to destabilize it. Your own video has already shown you leaning into the enemy being both strong and weak, talking about how weak the liberal mindset is, but how prolific it is, and yet it's not going away. There's also a general contempt for the weak in the Trump administration, pacifism being seen as trafficking with the enemy is seen in the Trump administration. And of course, we've seen with the rise of various influencers that the selective populism that is so popular among fascist movements is in fact what we are seeing with the Trump admin right now. Like, you can argue that the word is being used and you can whine about it, but if the word is accurate and if we can back up our statements, then the question becomes, why are you so comfortable being a fascist? Why are you so comfortable being a racist? Because it's not that me personally as a content creator, it's not that I want to shame you for being these things. I simply want to inquire why you are these things. Now, obviously, I'm saying you in the royal sense, you, the greater Republican movement, you, the greater conservative movement. Of course, that's what I'm referring to, but in some instances, this could be used to refer to a single individual. Why would you want to be all of these negative traits? Surely you would want to be a better version of yourself.
All right, folks. So Tom Homan, well, he just took it there. Take a look.
In these third world nations, they don't have systems like we do. So a lot of these Afghanistans, when they did get here and get vetted, they had no identification at all. Not a single travel document, not one piece of identification. And we're going to count on the people that run Afghanistan, the Taliban, to provide us any information who the bad guys were or who the good guys are? Certainly not. And many people need to understand that most terrorists in this world, most of them, aren't in any database. Unless they were found on a battlefield by DOD when did a retina scan and did into biometrics there, unless they're part of a T3 undercover investigation, we don't know who they are.
Now, that's all fascinating, Tom. I appreciate your rhetoric. I appreciate you going on Fox News to talk about that. But again, I feel like these are words that ring hollow when you actually look at the audit of the FBI specifically. This is information that is publicly available and was updated as of June 2025. This is very, very recent information on what we found in regards to people who were taken out of Afghanistan and actually are seen or not seen as terrorists. Like, this is recent info on that. You can say all of those words, and that's entirely fair, but if I actually look into the data available from our own administration that was coined, that was written under the Trump administration, and if it disagrees with you, if the numbers disagree with you and they are the numbers written by your own administration, then why should I care what opinion you've given on Fox News? Moreover, why should I care about the perspective that is being offered by liberal Hivemind when it is a perspective that is only being offered based off of sound bites from different news sources instead of actually looking into the data and the numbers?
So, and the same thing with illegal aliens. Over 10 million that came across the border in Joe Biden. There's no way to vet these people. You think El Salvador or Turkey or Sudan or any of these countries have the databases or system checks that we have? Do you think the government of China, Russia, Turkey, you think they're going to share that that data with us, even if they did have it. There's no way to clearly vet these people, 100% that they're safe to come in this country.
So I'm not gonna lie, I don't want to make fun of somebody for how they speak, but it is incredibly hard for me to listen to Tom Homan for more than a handful of seconds. Something about the way he speaks just gets into my ear and makes me feel like I'm being violated. But I think that the best thing we could do here would be to once again look at the data and statistics. So I can accept the claim that we can't vet these people, not at the rate that we should. Cool, that's entirely fair. So let's analyze what these people, in this case illegal immigrants, get up to in the United States. When we look at the actual statistics per year, like every single year that we have done this kind of data analysis on illegal immigrants in the United States, we have found that per capita illegal immigrants are almost all new immigrants, because this is legal and illegal immigrants. New immigrants in the United States are almost always less than half per capita of the reported crimes of native-born Americans. Now, that number did spike up in 2010, but even then, it's only a little over half. So what does this actually mean? This means that people who come over the border into the United States, who immigrate into the United States, are not responsible for as much crime as people in the United States. And if you want to have the opinion that that's because they are representative of less of the population, that doesn't work either, because we are talking about per capita statistics. That means that we are looking at per 100,000 immigrants, legal and illegal, and we are looking at per 100,000 American citizens. These numbers are adjusted to account for the fact that one group in these populations is representative of less of the United States population, and it shows that they do not commit as much crime as native-born Americans. So they're not overly responsible for a giant uptick in crime. Let's see if there's any positives that come from them then, if the, purported negatives aren't happening. If we look at the Economic Policy Institute, we can see that the fiscal impact of illegal immigrants, unauthorized immigrants, there is a broad consensus that immigration reduces our overall budget deficits. The net effect of immigration, including illegal immigration in the United States, is overall positive, not only for the United States, but even for the immigrants, their children, and grandchildren. It turns out people coming to the United States is good for the United States. So if Tom Homan's narrative is completely undermined by the audit of the FBI, if Tom Homan's narrative is completely undermined by every single analysis we've done on immigration in the United States, what actual point can he possibly make?
From these third world nations, President Trump's doing the right thing, reviewing every one of these people who came under the Biden administration and drilling down on them. I really truly think that most of them are going to end up being deported because we're not going to be able to properly vet them.
So that's kind of the problem. When you try drilling into this as hard as you are, you either end up getting just as many people slipping through the cracks as you were worried about in the first place, or you end up taking people who are largely innocent in the United States and getting rid of them or ruining their lives. As a country, why is that something you want your taxpayer dollars going towards? Like, not even from a liberal or left-wing perspective of, oh my God, this is a human rights violation, but like from the perspective of a conservative who cares about fiscal responsibility, why would you want to waste so much money on a program like that if the goal of the program is to make Americans safer, but by the numbers, it's not even accomplishing that?
I think most of them will end up being deported because we won't be able to properly vet them anyways. And I think that right there is the uncomfortable that Democrats just don't want to accept, are willfully blind and ignorant towards, because they know it benefits them politically to import the third world's masses, giving them endless taxpayer subsidies, creating lifelong voters out of the uneducated masses. But the simple fact is, it's really a basic statistics problem.
All right, so a few different claims have been made here, and I don't know if everybody caught them, but let's go over those real quick. One is about the Democrats and uneducated voters. So let's see here. The best way to figure this one out would be to look at the education statistics of people who vote red versus people who vote blue in the United States. Let's see what numbers we get from that. If we look at the actual data, it turns out that the Democrats generally have far higher voter turnout amongst the educated population, whereas Republican voters who don't have any formal education are the ones who represent the majority of Republican votes. So if you want to say the claim that the Democrats need the uneducated masses in order to swell their voting numbers, the numbers do not actually represent that. There is some truth to the fact that racial minorities vote Democrat more often than Republican, but that's again because the Democrats usually, not all the time, support policies that benefit them just as much as other white people in the United States. Whereas when the Republicans are in power, you get an increase to the amount of money going to ICE, where people are getting beaten, tortured, and thrown out of the country for not doing any crimes whatsoever. But the idea that the Democrats are using illegal immigration to import voters doesn't make any sense when you remember that if you are not a citizen of the United States, you're not allowed to vote. Like, not even looking at the data. The data shows you're incorrect, obviously. But outside of the data, the claim itself doesn't make any sense because your claim is based on the idea that these immigrants were not vetted. And if they are not vetted, they are not United States citizens. And if they are not United States citizens, they aren't voting, my guy. I don't know what to tell you, but every word you've said so far has either been a lie, projection, or some mixture of the two. And that's just kind of pathetic.
How exactly do you vet somebody that comes from Afghanistan or Somalia or Yemen? If they don't have a government that we can communicate with, that will share information, if they don't have the systems and the databases in place, they don't have the technology, well then the whole process is useless. And so the question becomes, is the potential threat worth it? My view, absolutely not.
Now, that's actually a fair point, and I'm willing to grant you that if you think that the threat of people coming in from these countries far outweighs any benefits that we have, then yeah, I can understand that perspective. It's a fair perspective to have, and to argue otherwise is to be a little naive. I do respect you, liberal Hivemind, for giving that perspective and being honest about it. Now, again, let's see if the numbers show what you're saying, and we've already kind of looked at these numbers. We've already done this. We know that the likelihood of crimes happening in the United States is much lower amongst illegal immigrants. We know, thanks to the audit of the FBI done this year, that realistically, the number of people who are actually terrorists in the immigrants that are coming from at least Afghanistan specifically are so nightmarishly low so as not to even be statistically significant. If the likelihood of crime isn't there, if the connection to terrorism is not there, then realistically you don't have an argument. Your argument is about these things. The pillars of your argument are United States safety. And that is a thing you and I can agree on. United States safety should come first when we are talking about taking in people into the United States. The U.S. should first and foremost look after its own citizens, and then secondly, look after its soft power, because that allows us to maintain our stability. If those are the things that we care about as a nation, and you and I can agree on those, then hopefully you and I can also agree that the numbers do not pan out in your favor. They pan out in favor of bringing immigrants into the United States. They are responsible for less crimes. They are economically good for our country. And in terms of the big T word, in terms of terrorism, we don't have the numbers to show that the links are there in the first place. Every single angle of this particular gigantic bitch fit can be shown to be a completely useless angle once analyzed. I want to look at one more thing in this video before I conclude, but so far I haven't been impressed by any of the rhetoric or any of the reasoning that has been used in this.
Which is what we're seeing all over social media. The left immediately runs to the same old tired script. Oh, it's racist. The travel ban had nothing to do with terror in the region back in 2017. No, it was a Muslim ban. Donald Trump just hates Muslims. He hates brown people. And now it's the same thing, right? With this issue we're seeing with the Somali community in Minnesota, with shutting immigration doors to countries like Afghanistan and others, and now with the halting of over 2 million asylum claims.
The Trump administration has now paused issuing visas for people traveling on Afghan passports, as well as stopped processing all immigration requests from the country. Now, the new directives do go beyond just Afghanistan. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced that all asylum decisions will be put on hold until every single person is vetted and screened, while the status of green card holders from 19 countries of concern will be re-examined.
The left will tell you, oh, Donald Trump's doing this because he hates brown people. That's the reduction, right? But they say this every single time. They said it about the border wall. They said it about the original travel bans. But obviously this has nothing to do with that.
So, like I said, this is the last thing I want to analyze here. This idea that the left as a whole is reducing what Donald Trump is doing down to racism or down to a hatred of brown people. So, technically, it is that, but there is more nuance to be had here. That's the point I will grant liberal Hivemind. There is more here than just Donald Trump is a racist. In fact, if we refer back to Umberto Eco's own essay, this is part of his appeal to a social frustration. The typical feature of any fascist is to try to appeal to the social frustrations of a middle class, argue that that middle class is suffering from some economic crisis or some political humiliation, and to find people that he can blame that economic crisis and that political humiliation on. The two targets that Trump has chosen in his administration have historically been trans people and people who are not American citizens. And it just so happens that people who are not American citizens tend to also be of various different ethnicities. The idea that Trump in his heart of hearts hates all brown people or hates all trans people, I don't think is the case. In fact, I don't actually care what's going on in his heart of hearts. I think what he's doing is the standard thing that you do with the fascist playbook. You appeal to the social frustration of your majority populace. Instead of them scrutinizing your administration and the failures that your administration is going through, like the entire debacle with the tariffs, the way he's fucked up United States soft power across the entire globe. Instead of having the Republican Party and the Republican voters scrutinizing those things, you create a scapegoat so that you can tell people that their social frustrations should be aimed at that scapegoat. And the two scapegoats he has chosen have been trans people, both in his first administration and more so in his second administration, and people who are coming in from Mexico or other countries, because these are people that the majority of the United States population do not understand. In the case of immigrants, oftentimes literally because there's a language barrier, there's an experience barrier. The cruelty towards these people ends up being the point, because you can create an entire television fiasco about your cruelty towards these groups. And you can slowly normalize to your base that being cruel to these groups is a good thing, and that unites your base. For Donald Trump, it's not about hatred. And I think that's what a lot of even Democrats don't understand. It's not about hatred. It's not about who he dislikes. It's about who is a convenient scapegoat. Trans people make up such a small amount of the United States population that it's easy for somebody to have never met a trans person, or in the case of somebody passing, have met someone and never know they are trans. This makes them a super easy scapegoat. You can make up a billion narratives about people you've never met. It's like having an author write a book about a fictional species. You can accept anything the author says about that species and their customs because you've never been introduced to that species. It's identical with trans people. And with immigrants, it's the same thing. Sell people on the idea that their economic frustrations are happening because of illegal immigration, tax money going to them, healthcare money going to them, jobs being lost to them, and you can get people on board with damn near anything. I'm not trying to sit here and just soapbox about Donald Trump being a fascist. I'm actively looking at the literature that's been written about the ideology and comparing it to the current administration and what it does. And I think that's fair. And, you know, if you're a fair and even-minded content creator, I hope you would think the same thing. But that's as far into this video as I want to get. Most of the other points in here are reiterations of previous ones, and I feel like if basically everything you've said has been able to be refuted by a little bit of research and a little bit of reading, then I don't owe it to you to show the other 20-30% of your video. Nothing of worth was gained, so abandoning it means nothing of worth will be lost. But what do y'all think in the comments section below? I want to know what y'all's opinion is, both on his original video and on my handling of it. I will have sources for everything that I showed on screen in the description below, and hopefully y'all will do some reading as well. I think that doing that kind of reading is very helpful if you plan on engaging in any of these rhetorical sparring matches. Having a good base basis of information is so important right now, and I wish I had a sponsor to plug here to say like, hey, get new information at whatever the fuck. Instead, I'll say that I want to reiterate my plug from before. If you feel like my content is giving you honest and fair political analysis and that it's making politics a little less miserable to engage with, then do me a favor and subscribe and tell a few friends what I'm doing over here. And if you like what I'm doing here, you can support me over on Patreon. You're going to see a list of all the people who support me coming up in a bit, and every person who supports me on Patreon does get behind the scenes information about what's going on in my real life and on the channel in the background. Also, if you want to hear me cover the news, then I have a secondary channel called Suris Live, where I go over that 1 to twice a day. And I also have a Mad to the Gathering channel if you want to hear me talk about card games and move away from the political sphere a little bit. That said, thank you all for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you being here. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitt, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.